You are watching this video right now. You might be thinking to yourself, hey, I'm here in the real world doing something else, but I've decided that I want to watch this video. But then, if you are here, how do you know that you're not dreaming right now? How do you know that your eyes are unclosed and that you are not asleep in your bed right now or somewhere else completely? Even further than that, how do you know that you have eyes at all? How do you know that you have a body? How do you know that you're not just some kind of formless consciousness floating around? How do you know that you not a brain in a jar being stimulated by a supercomputer to make it look like there's a world outside of you? All these questions seem really strange when we think about them, but they are valid. They're legitimate questions that any one of us could ask at any time, and we don't necessarily have answers for them. So let's explore a few different ways that we try to figure out whether or not we actually awake or if we dreaming. The first and most obvious way that we seem to know that we awake is by looking around us and seeing the things that are supposedly around us when we dreaming. We see that there are solid objects that have weight and density, that they take up space, and that they interact with our bodies in physical ways. If we're dreaming, why do we see these things that seem so real? Well, there's nothing in the brain itself that makes us think we're awake. There's no switch in our heads that flips from dreaming mode to wakefulness mode. Instead, what happens is that our brains are constantly trying to make sense of the information that they receive from our senses. Our brains take in information from the world around us through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, and they use that information to create a model of the world. And that model tells us what we believe to be true. So when we're awake, our brain takes in information from our senses and creates a model of the world that matches what we're experiencing. When we dream, our brain takes in information from our senses, but it creates a model of the world that doesn't match what we're experiencing. In other words, our brain can't tell the difference between a dream and wakefulness. It simply creates a model of the world based on the information that it receives. Now, does this mean that dreams are somehow less real than wakefulness? Not necessarily. It just means that our brains create models of the world both when we awake and when we dreaming. So how do we know that the model our brain is creating now is the real world and not just a dream? Well, one way we try to find out is by looking for inconsistencies in our experiences. If we notice something that doesn't make sense or that doesn't fit with our model of the world, we might conclude that we're dreaming. For example, if we were in our bedroom and we saw a dog walking up the wall, we might think, hey, that's weird. Dogs can't walk up walls, especially not in my bedroom. In that case, we would conclude that we must be dreaming because people can't fly. Basically, if we experience anything that we know goes against the laws of physics or the rules of our world, we might think, hey, this isn't right. I must be dreaming. But the problem with this way of figuring out whether or not we awake is that we can't be 100% sure that we not dreaming. After all, our brains create models of the world both when we're awake and when we're dreaming. So there's no way to know for sure that our brain isn't creating a model of a world where cars fly and dogs walk up walls. We can never be 100% sure that we're awake. Okay, so what else can we try? Another way we try to figure out whether or not we're awake is by trying to move. If we're dreaming, our bodies will often feel heavy or like they're made of lead. It'll be difficult or impossible for us to move. This is because our brain doesn't need to send signals to our muscles when we're dreaming. Well, a third way we try to figure out whether or not we awake is by asking ourselves to remember something from the past. If we're dreaming, our memories won't be very coherent, or they might even be impossible. This is because our brain doesn't need to make sense when we're dreaming. Our brain can simply create whatever memories it wants to create in order to make the dream seem more realistic. So if we ask ourselves to remember something from the past, and we remember it, or we remember something that does make sense, it might mean that we're dreaming. However, there are certain medical conditions that can make it difficult for us to remember things. And sometimes we just and remember things because we never paid attention to them in the first place. So let's try one more thing. A fourth way we try to figure out whether or not we reawake is by trying to perform a logical or mathematical calculation. If we're dreaming, our brains might not be able to perform calculations very well. This is because our brain doesn't need to be logical when we're dreaming. Our brain can simply create whatever numbers it wants to create in order to make the dream seem more realistic. So if we try to perform a calculation and we get a funny answer, or we uneven start the calculation in the first place, it might mean that we're dreaming. But again, there are certain medical conditions that can make it difficult for us to concentrate or to think logically. Sometimes we perform a calculation because we don't know the necessary facts, or because we not very good at math. So how do we know that we're not dreaming? Well, the truth is that we can't be 100% sure that we're not dreaming. There's no way to know for sure that we're awake. We can only look at the evidence and try to make the best guess we can. The reason we were even talking about this is because there are certain medical conditions that can make it difficult for us to know whether or not we reawake. For example, there's a medical condition called sleep paralysis, which can cause people to be conscious but unable to move. People who suffer from sleep paralysis often report seeing strange things or hearing strange noises, and they might not be sure whether or not those things are real. Another medical condition that can make it difficult for us to know whether or not we reawake is a brain injury or a stroke. People who have suffered a brain injury or a stroke might have difficulty processing sensory information or making decisions, and this can make it difficult for them to know whether or not they're dreaming. This might seem like a weird topic to talk about, but it's actually something that philosophers have been thinking about for centuries. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato, for example, wondered whether we could ever really be sure that we're awake, or if we're just dreaming. And the 17th century French philosopher René Descartes wondered whether we could ever be sure that we have a body at all, or if we just a formless consciousness.
Oh.
These are deep and complex questions that we may never be able to answer completely. But that doesn't mean that they're not worth asking. By thinking about these questions, we learn more about ourselves and the world around us. So next time you lying in bed at night and you not quite sure whether or not you reawake, just remember that you're not alone. Some of the smartest people who ever lived have asked the same question, and they didn't have an answer either. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and a comment below. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.